Welcome, everybody, to the show. Joining us tonight is our very special guest, Grant Dalgliesh. Grant, the first thing I want to ask you, first of all, thanks for coming,
My
is what
pleasure.
is the actual correct pronunciation of your surname?
Well, you did pretty good.
Okay.
It's there's a story there. My mom and dad both say it differently, which is
Oh,
kind of odd. My dad, uh, it must be the one who's right because it's his name. He's he's Tom Dalgliesh.
the husband is never right, as you know.
Well,
Oh,
okay, we're just giving him credit for originality, not necessarily
okay.
matrimonially speaking, but Dalgliesh, as in doll, like a child's doll, and Gleish, and it's a Scottish name.
Hmm.
This my father's a native of Aberdeen, Scotland, and he came over to the New World in about 1966, and ended up meeting my mother, who is from Portland, Oregon. Um, and he had met her actually proverbially on shore leave because he was in the merchant marine, sailing around the world. He left home at 16 years old, actually, from
Hmm.
Aberdeen, sailed around the world, met my mother, and then that attracted him to staying in this part of the world. Settled in Canada because, um, well, he had some Scottish relatives who'd come to Canada just a couple of years before, and there was also the Vietnam War going on, and so he thought he wanted to be in Canada. And my mother moved up to Canada. They married in 1967, and then we were all in Canada for a long time. And then, ironically, in '94, we moved to the United States. We're in Blaine, Washington. It's literally the border town from Vancouver.
Hmm.
It's the Windsor Detroit relationship that probably some of your is local to you guys.
Hmm.
And to finish the story there, my mother says Penny Dalgliesh, so it's almost the same, but it's Dal instead of Doll. And I picked up Dalgliesh. Dalgliesh rolls off my tongue naturally, and I think maybe that's the motherly influence, maybe from the womb. I don't know. But so the long answer to your question, Grant says Grant Dalgliesh.
Okay.
Tom says Tom Dalgliesh, and they're both correct. What I have heard over the years is everything from uh, Dalgliesh to Dalgladesh to they
Isn't
used to
that
call
where the
me.
Ewoks came from?
Yeah, right. I think that's one of those third moons of Endor kind of places, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when I was a kid, they called me Granny Relish, and it was
We're not even talking about what I got, so
yeah,
no thanks.
I bet, yeah. But you got
Yeah,
some
encouraged
historical
me to
characters.
look into the family history, and for the record, no relation.
No
So,
relation to the
thank,
very famous
thank,
ones.
yeah,
Yes.
no, thank
Well,
you.
it's
Oh,
it's anyway, but we've got
eh,
that clear now.
yes.
Dalgleish, and I respond to almost anything similar to that. And one of the other ironies of that name is it's really not that hard to say once you know, right?
Hmm.
Dalgleish. It's not too hard at all, but to see it spelled out, um, Dalgliesh. When you break it down like that, that's not too bad either. But when you see it written for the first time, most people choke, and
Mm.
so it is what it is. It
You
is.
know, I pronounce the IE very naturally if it's a not obviously Anglo-Saxon word or
Mm-hmm,
name in the German way, which is
mm-hmm,
exactly the way you're saying it. So,
mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was that complicated. Once I actually looked at what all the letters were, though, there were many years where I didn't really pay close attention to what all the letters were, because there's
Right.
a
Well, that's also relevant. The extra L in there gets dropped a
mhm,
lot, uh, and then it once it's written wrong, like Dalgliesh or something, then people think it's that. There's also sometimes that first L gets dropped, and we can be the Daglish, and so every variation under the sun, and I just have to deal with it. But it's okay. I kind of got used to it, and I don't mind. And it's actually gotten to be a cooler name, I think, over the years, as maybe more people have heard of other famous Dalgleishes. There's a Kenny Dalglish, who's a football coach in in the UK, former player and then a coach who's pretty famous in that part of the world, and a fictional character by the mystery author P.D. James
Hmm.
named Inspector Dalgliesh,
Hmm.
and great books. And they were made into TV movies a long time ago, and they were remade. They're right now, in fact, they're fresh.
Hmm.
And the actor Bertie Cavell plays Inspector Dalgliesh. These are on streaming different places, and I recommend them. They're really good.
I may investigate that in my copious free time.
Uh-huh.
It occurred to me while I was kind of thinking about what we were going to talk about tonight that I feel like Columbia Games occupies a bit of a unique position in the gaming hobby. What
Yeah.
didn't used to be unique for a number of reasons, but this is kind of the angle I thought it through in the late 70s and early 80s. There were a lot of companies that were wargaming companies that got into role-playing games, and or companies that started as role-playing games but did some war games. Chaosium actually did some early war games.
Hmm.
Basically nobody's like that anymore, except for you guys to do
Right.
both RPG and war game products.
It is a little unique, and it's because my father is likes both parts of the business, and in fact all kinds of games, um, and because the business for him historically is his baby, his passion. So he follows his whim. He also follows the market, and what things are uh, hot. When collectible card games were hot in the early '90s, he made a war game collectible card game with Dixie.
Hmm. I interviewed him about Dixie
I
actually
bet you did.
back
Yeah,
in the day.
right. And so Harn, as it was, came out in 1983, which is why we're talking about it a lot this year. 40
Hmm.
years of Harn, and we did do our 40th anniversary edition of the core book this year, and we're on a bit of a kick, upgrading and relaunching some of those books in the new hardcover format.
Hmm.
They're gorgeous. I'm sure you'll attest to that.
Indeed, I can.
And the at the same time, we're still doing war games, right? We're overdue right now for a game called Alliance,
Hmm.
that's about the Napoleonic Wars, a grand strategic game on that topic, multiplayer. And my dad is the brainchild there, and also the bottleneck. That's an interesting uh, dichotomy, because we're also maybe a little unique in that there's nothing published by Columbia Games that didn't go through us, through our mill,
Hmm.
um, and that's because it's not perceived by us as a purely fiscal arrangement where like shareholders and dividends and all that stuff. We don't think in those terms. We think about the games that we love,
Hmm.
and so my dad taught me that, and I'm carrying on with him in that kind of a way of looking at it. And that means we just do whatever we really want. And that's a nice comment. We appreciate that you backed us for that. I have heard that it is unloaded from the ship and has cleared customs literally yesterday, or I guess it would be today because yesterday was a holiday, and
True.
should be in the hands of the freight forwarder probably tomorrow, and turned around and winging its way to all the backers really soon. So
Hmm.
that's cool.
Can't wait to
And
see it
then,
also. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's going to be great.
yeah. I'm super pleased with it. It's not only a nice new format, hardcover and hefty. We also added a whole lot more color and color artwork,
Hmm.
um, really bringing it up a notch. If any of you viewers have seen Harn in the past, perhaps even like the way past, um, it's the same great writing. It's really hasn't changed all that much. It's just maybe where there was one paragraph, then there are three now. But true to what was said before, and just a lot
So
prettier.
yes, I remember
Yeah,
that.
there you go. And inside that is mostly black and white with a few color pages in the
Hmm.
middle. And now every single page of the new Harn world is dripping with color.
You
And
know, the
so,
youngsters are going to look at this kind of stuff and think this is unbearably primitive, but this was super fancy at the time, right? With the
yeah,
unique loose leaf format, and you guys maybe not be able to see this really nice cream colored paper. I always loved the production values on these. Actually, you
well,
guys were sorry. Go
it,
ahead.
it's again, it was because it's my dad's passion that he always did that. He always did it the way he thought it should be done, and sometimes it might have been more expensive or even unorthodox compared to what the rest of the market was doing.
Hmm.
Um, but it tended to work, and it's certainly being unique has been kind of a way of staying alive all of these years. But it's also really deep down. It's the stick to itiveness and the
Hmm.
hard work that my dad uh, did all these years and continues to do. He's 78 just recently, August 24th. He turned 78, but still working every day, and he works hard. He did have a minor-ish heart attack in October last year.
Hmm.
Has got stints to and so he says he's better than ever. Um, but it's harder for him to work as hard as he used to, but still he sure tries. He's also struggling a little bit with eyesight, and there's an upcoming surgery to
Join the
try to
club on
help.
that. Holy
Yeah,
cow!
and so he's working really hard on maps and things, and yet in order to do it, he has to really push his eyes, and it's a testament to his willpower that he keeps on doing it. But it's definitely his love, and I think in truth he's not going to stop until they cart him off in a box. It's just he loves it, and I'm okay with that because I get the benefit of working together with him. It can be stormy, family. There's an interesting dynamic, but on balance, I'll take it. And so I'll answer a couple questions just popped up there. That one, easy answer. It's 100% still compatible.
That's
Um,
exactly how I was going to put it. Actually,
yeah, good. Nothing was changed in any sort of a sense that would violate what was written. It's just a little bit more like where I think I said earlier, where there was one paragraph about, say, a particular craftsman in the city of Tushal. There may now be 3 paragraphs about that same guy. But it's very carefully written with a mind towards internal consistency. Uh, we use the term canon for harnic content that is even gospel. So, to use a couple of religious
hmm
quotes, that um, they the team of writers and artists and people that work with us around the world, actually, it's a very diverse team all over the world. Um, they understand that too, and so we all sort of work together with the same intention to honor and preserve what was written, expand where we can within that constraint. Another critical point to understand about Harn is it's a real world, right? It's presented at big level with details like the plate tectonics of the world and star charts, and then little details like the name of these craftsmen in a particular city. Um, there's also a history, and so it's a big level history in the Harn World book, the kind of master module. You have a big level history. Going back 20,000 years and forward to the present day with more detail as you get closer to the present. That is in turn expanded upon in a region like the Caldor book, the history of Caldor. But it always runs up until the present day. In Harnic time, that's the year 720. TR, which stands for Tusen Reckoning, that's the name of the calendar, because Harn has a calendar. It has unique months. It has festivals. It has all kinds of things to make it a very real world. But we never kick the clock forward. So in all the 40 years of working on Harn, the time is still 720. And that's important for a few reasons. as a game master, you can appreciate that the stuff you have hasn't been violated. It hasn't been changed. There's no invalidation of what stories you told, and that was deliberate, so that a game master who has run with Harn for a little while, we like to say, has developed their Harn, or personal Harn, and some of the things that were posited to be about to happen in 720, maybe many people have unfolded them in different ways in their own Harn, and they can have confidence that what they did is not going to be contradicted. So even in all of the years of writing, we only expand history and present day. So that statement that he made about the D-ring binders full of stuff, I'm proud to say that it's 100% valid, and so a good investment to have kept all these years. I would still make a case for getting some new material, again, because it won't contradict, but it will only beautify what you have. And expand and open the mind a little more. And the other comment just before that was a bit of a nice statement about how this user played in the Kingdom of Kaldor. And that's one of my favorites too. Kaldor, a feudal realm in the center of Harn. It's noted for having an ailing king who's kind of a medium power kind of a guy, but there are barons and earls and other people vying for position, and everyone's waiting for the guy to die. And so there's a chapter,
and he's kept him waiting for a while too.
Yeah, well, he's kept him waiting in Harnic time, and we've kept everyone waiting for 40 years in real time. But we'll never ever, as I said, contradict it, and we allow people to play that out how they want. Mm-hmm. But there's a chapter, a few pages in the Kaldor book called "The Harnic Succession Crisis," and it explains who the movers and shakers are that have a claim this way or that to the throne. Some are by family or by blood. Some are by virtue of being part of a previous dynasty. And then there's just a few people that have a claim based on outright significance or influence. And that's all set up, again, so that you can tell the story, unfold it however you want. It could be negotiation, and it could be an outright war. In fact, there's been a war game developed on the Kaldoric Civil War. Hasn't been published yet, but it's somewhat analogous to our war game, our block game, Richard III, which is like the Wars of the Roses, and it's basically a civil war in England. And so the Kaldoric Civil War board game, which we will finish one of these days, would be intended as a tool, a fun game, and a tool to play out that event, and all of that is just one thing going on in Kaldor. There's a lot more.
There's a ton going on everywhere in Harn. That's kind of one of the charms of it. I want to touch on this, and maybe Tom is the right person to answer a couple of these questions, right?
I'll do my best.
It must have been a decision that was somebody consciously made the decision in the early to mid 80s when, and I haven't really traced like which game or publisher started doing what we now call meta plot, where the game like has a built-in story that keeps moving forward, and that became incredibly pervasive for a while. I don't know if GDW came up with it. That's where I first saw it, but with Mega Traveler, but even with Classic Traveler, they were kind of playing with that. But certainly West End got into that. The Vampire, the White Wolf certainly did tons and tons and tons of that. The Legend of the Five Rings folks at Alderac did tons of that. So that must have been a decision that was made at some point to just not do that, and to just, we have our starting date, and anything past that is up to you. The person who is investigating the setting.
Yeah, it was a founding decision Um, I would assume that it was a little bit of a joint decision between Tom and the original inventor or creator of Harn, Mr. Robin Crosby, who sadly is no longer with us. But Robin brought Harn to my father at a Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada gaming club, and my dad fell in love with it because of Robin's amazing maps, and like the Harn map that is on the wall behind me, and I think on the screen here as well,
Yep.
is that was all done by hand with Pantone pens, and the text was
And
letra-set.
Zipatone.
Yeah.
Which nobody even knows what that is anymore.
Right. And letra-set for the letters.
Yeah.
Those are from the paper age, right? That's the dark ages just about. But that beautiful map is still, in my opinion, unmatched, and in quite a few ways, artistically, in terms of its plausibility, like the mountain ranges and then the rivers flow in logical and realistic ways. The climate zones and the vegetation are kind of fit with what it should be. And all of that was done early on because Robin liked it that way, and my dad naturally just loved it that way. And so together, and with a few other people that were hired by Columbia Games, it stuck to that model of geographic realism, historical realism. Of course, there's fantasy. There's elves and orcs, dwarves, monsters. All of those things are very kind of, I'll say, cleverly positioned so that they could be mythical, if you wish, or they could be integral, if you wish. And it's again the GM to tell that story. I'll touch on the question that is on the screen here. Height mapping and the like are quite a thing. So on the original map, there is you can even see there on the map in front of you, right above where we're talking, is a mountain range, some white areas that are alpine, and there's some named peaks with elevations that were set back in 1983. And since then, in the same spirit as the requirement to write things to the canon, the maps have to be canon. So we've been doing what we call the Atlas Harnica series of maps, and those are a zoom in on each grid square of the Harn map. The grid, which runs like 1 to 10 on one axis and A to M on the other, so that any coordinate is a grid square. And then we have what is a product for a map about that grid square, and it's a zoom in, and it's true to the larger map. And here Gary is showing us one of them from the region up in Orbal. I can pick out the Geldes Fjord there. And so there are hexes on that map, and those hexes correspond exactly to the hexes on the original Harn map. And also on this map, you will see some mountains in the lower corner. The white part and the brown are also mountains, but just a little bit subalpine. And there are contour lines. And so those contour lines are 500 feet on this scale. And we would in turn have contour lines on maps that are more local. So there's you can zoom in from here, not literally in this map, but onto another map of, say, Geldheim, which is a city there in one of those hexes at the head of the Geldes Fjord. And there'll be a local map about that, which also has contours on it. And in turn, from there, you can even get into the castle at Geldheim and see the plans of it. But in all cases, the heights are thought out. And if you look closely at the river valleys coming out of that mountain in the south, there is a river, right? And that river flows down and drains into the ocean. And the contours, of course, pretty much never cross the river. Like, I mean, in some senses they have to at some point, but they follow the river, creating a valley, and a river doesn't tend to drop very much in its course, except of course when usually the upper few miles of it where it comes out of the mountains. And pretty soon after that, it levels off. In fact, there's rapids illustrated there in Alden at Hex, and anywhere north, actually, but downriver of there, um, it's a more gradual flowing river. And you can learn all of that by simply looking at the contours.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a critical eye. And it takes some people kind of gloss it all over, don't really care about it. But for those that do, it's there. And that's the idea, that the data is there. So the game master can tell a story and have the tools at the fingertips to describe what is being seen quite richly. And no matter where the players go, there's a reasonable amount of information available to describe what's going on, which means you don't have to shoehorn it or control it. And it's magical in that sense. There's just nothing like it. Again, no meta plot, just a sandbox that you can play with. In another way to illustrate that is that when you get down to a city, say Gelderheim or Tashal, we talked about earlier, is in Caldor. There's a plan of the city with buildings and a key to the plan. So the numbers in many buildings, which in turn are described in a key with the name of the craftsman or the resident of that building. But there's also a whole bunch of other buildings that are left deliberately empty for the game master to populate as desired. And so it's a beautiful combination of a living, breathing world, very, very well fleshed out, and a sandbox for you to play in and customize physically in the present or the past. And then also as it goes forward, like I've mentioned before, we won't contradict your timeline. So that segues actually nicely into the question on the screen here. There have been some novels. The most significant one is a book that is called The Fragment. It was written by my dad's very best friend and co-founder of the company way back in the early 70s. And his name is Lance. And The Fragment is a novel, which means it has a narrative. And in order to deal with the challenge that we're not allowed to tell a narrative going forward, The Fragment is set in Harnic history. It's set 300 and some years before the present, and it is a narrative story that details, like an actual novel with a story written kind of bit by bit, but fit within a larger arching story. One of my favorite authors in the real world is James Michener, famous for a whole bunch of books that have a genre that you would call historical fiction. And The Fragment is a little bit like that. It's a fictional story set within the historical framework of Harn. And I recommend it. It's very special. It's available, of course, from Columbia Games, and we would love your feedback on it. So read it and tell us.
I knew. I think I lost track of that. I could swear there were some short stories that maybe were fan items as well at one point.
Yeah.
Or I may be getting that mixed up with Web of the Widow too.
Well, yeah, there's so many things. It's hard to keep it all straight. I can't either. Don't feel at all shy about that. You touched on the concept of fan material. That's worth mentioning, that there is a wealth of fan material out there. There's a website that is unofficial and official at the same time called lithia.com. And Lithia just happens to be the name of the continent that is. Harn is a little island analogous to Britain, more or less, size and climate wise and location wise on a globe. off the northwest coast of Lithia. I can tell what you're doing here, Gary. You're going to show us a map of Lithia.
I
And,
could. Well, I've shown it off already. I don't have it. So
but there it is on the cover. It's good enough. Yeah,
it is on the cover. That's true. I might have it in electronic version too that I scanned in at some point, but it's a gorgeous map.
Yeah. So that Lithia is just the name chosen for the fan site. There's a forum on Lithia that's vibrant, like a community of people that are passionate and very welcoming. So please check that out. You'll find that you can ask any questions and people will help and answer in a very welcoming and friendly way. And then there's a repository of fanon. That's the term for articles and maps and stories written that are technically not canon, because we can't say for sure that they don't break or violate something that was written before. But I can say that there's something north of 1,000 of these fanon pieces, and the most part, they're very good. They tend to follow the format, both physically in terms of the layout and the structure, and they tend to follow the format also in terms of the writing and the mapping. Some of them are illustrated by Richard Luschek, who's the artist for Harn since for 20 years or so.
I would have worn my Richard Luschek shirt for tonight, but it's in the laundry, unfortunately, because I wore it at Origins.
Oh well,
so,
okay.
Richard
will be sad, but it's all right.
Well,
we'll have to do another interview. We'll do one about the art at some point, and we'll have you wearing that shirt. We'll have Richard on. We'll do a round table.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Actually, I'd love
he's
to have
just down the road. He's in Cincinnati. And,
I'm not sure I knew that. Did I not know that?
Yes. So it's a global community. Like I said,
I don't need to buy my shirts through the internet anymore. I can just drive down there and pick them up. That'd be great.
Go and have a talk and have a beer with Richard. He's a great guy. He came and visited us at Gen Con this year. And it was always good to see him face to face, but we talk all the time and email all the time. And part of his passion for Harn is it's everywhere. You can see it in the art. You can see it in how when he does a painting or a drawing of a scape, of a landscape or something, before he even does it, he does a 3D SketchUp model, which is a piece of software for making 3D renderings.
Oh yeah, and he does. You watch the videos on YouTube too.
Yeah, they're there for your edification. There's like a video, one I would even call attention to right now, because we are certainly focused on the Dwarven Kingdom of Azadmir right now, and that's because it's on Kickstarter right now, and still have a little while. September 27th that ends, so there's plenty of time to back that and get the Kingdom of Azadmir at the Kickstarter price, which is $10 less than it's going to be later. But never fear, it'll be around later. If you don't have the time or anything to get it now, don't worry. But Azadmir is the Dwarven realm. It's up in the mountains. And so, in fact, when you get up there, the 3D SketchUp and the elevations are extra important. But and so Richard created SketchUp videos of areas, and then he made his drawings from those, which is a really masterful way to do it. It's awesome, actually. So I know I'm talking about all kinds of things at the same time, and I hope I finished some of the stories I started. But to sum up this part, Richard is marvelous. He illustrates not only for the canon of Columbia Games, but much of the fanon. And that is how I got to that segue. And so you can get online and go to lithia.com and download a whole bunch of stuff, perfectly free stuff that is actually really good on average, and get a taste of Harn. And there's also quite a few free things you can get from Columbia Games on columbiagames.com. So viewers are welcome and encouraged to do both those things. And I might as well say that on our Azadmir Kickstarter running right now, there is a $1 pledge level, which is chock-a-block full of stuff that comes for that $1 that also give you a nice sampling of what's going on. So community was how I think I got onto that tack, and it's a marvelous. It's a rich and vibrant community where people are passionate about Harn and also very welcoming and happy to share and encourage people who show an interest, because it's a tight knit community, and all of us from myself, like at a publisher standpoint to users and fans, we kind of all seem to share the same vision here, and I think that's just magical. I don't know that there's anything like it in the world, but I'm really pleased to be part of it. And 40 years so far. I was 8 when that started, and if I can have my druthers, we'll
Oh
be
my
doing it
God,
for
you're
40
younger
more
than me
years.
too, for Pete's sake. Is everybody around here younger than me? My goodness. Since you mentioned Gen Con,
Yes.
because you guys had not been at Gen Con as exhibitors for quite a while, right?
Well, so
I can't speak from personal experience because the last Gen Con I was at was the last one. It was in Milwaukee.
Okay. So
And you
if we
guys
go
were
back
there every
that
year,
far,
you know?
if we go back that far in history, uh, we went to Milwaukee to Gen Con. I remember being there as a kid, and I loved it. Just it was awesome. I went a few times after it moved to Milwaukee, or from Milwaukee to Indianapolis. I think the last time that was like in terms of consecutive was quite a while ago, 2003, and we took a big break. I'm not even sure why, other than just the hard reality of that we're a little family business, and in order to go there, we have to get there, and we have to sort of almost shut down the business while we're there, and so there's a lot of implications. But in 2017, we came back to Gen Con in Indy, and then we came in 2018, 2019, and we would have come in 2020, but of course, Corona COVID intervened. It also intervened in 2021. And although Gen Con was running again in 22, we decided not to go that year. It just didn't feel quite like we were ready to get back in the world. But we were there in force in 2023, just
I
last
saw the
month.
pictures. I was very impressed with the booth.
Yeah, there was a nice big step up. I want to give credit to Richard Ivansek, who is a fan and a graphic artist who helped conceive and then actually produce the backdrops for the booth. They are marvelous, and we'll be able to use those again, I think, next year, and we're already planning that. We've got our booth reserved for 2024. Richard Ivanchek did a nice job with that, and I want to say thanks. And we had a really good time. We focused on Harn, so despite the fact that we have this diverse company with some war games, I got Slapshot here. There's a Spook of
classic.
Hockey. I got The Last Spike, which is my train game, kind of my answer to Ticket to Ride. We got a lot of stuff, but we chose this year at Gen Con to focus on Harn. We was all Harn all the time, and we had a really good time. We had pre-release copies of the new Harn World book that I air-shipped in from the printer, and we sold those out in the second day because everyone saw that it was marvelous, and I only had 48 copies, but we sold them all, and we had a great time. We had a couple other cool things going on there. We had Trevor Duvall with us. Trevor runs a really awesome podcast YouTube channel called Me, Myself, and Die, DIE, where he talks about role playing in all kinds of capacities. Trevor is a voice actor by trade, a very charismatic speaker, and a passionate maker of film, and his channel really conveys that. He also happens to be a fan of Harn, and truthfully, unsolicited, he created videos about Harn, and it was through that I discovered him. And so we became closer, and I invited him to come to Gen Con, and we had a great time. So that was his first Gen Con. He had fun. I had fun. his passion came across to when he spoke to people, and we spoke to a lot of people. We had a promotion going, which I've done a few years in a row now at Gen Con. It's quite successful for us, where Gen Con produces a little coupon book,
Mhm.
and every person who comes to the show gets the coupon book, and a company or an exhibitor can have a slot in that. And so we got one, and we put in there an advertisement for a free Harn map, a physical Harn map that if you come by the booth, you get one. And so a better part of 1,000 people came and gave us the coupon, traded for the map. We collected their email address so that we can stay in touch. And so we were able to speak to a lot of people and give them our elevator speech on Harn. And a certain amount of them couldn't leave without taking a Harn book with them. And it's a marvelous concept. And I do contrast it with memories of Gen Con old, where although we did fine, we sold things. The majority of people walked
Definitely
on
sold
by.
things to me.
Yeah, well, there you go. But the majority of people did just kind of walk on by the booth, and I think partly was the eye candy of the booth might not have been up to par, but it's not just that, right? The
It
truth
is
is,
now up to par.
yeah, I'm proud of that. Again, I'll say thanks, Richard. Richard Ivansek, who did it, and Richard Lushek, who contributed as well, because
Mhm.
it's his art. But that helps. It's definitely a little more effective at turning heads. But there's another thing, like people at Gen Con they got to be overwhelmed. There's just so much to
Oh
see. You look at
God. I saw
everywhere.
pictures of it, of just like that press of people in that big open atrium, whatever, with the balconies, and there were like there are probably 10,000 people in this picture. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
I'd love to
sardines.
go, but oh my God, I don't know if I want to deal with that.
Yeah,
Holy cow. I guess
yeah.
I got to time it so I show up on Sunday at like 2 p.m.
Well, it starts to clear out a little bit there, although there is a lot of last minute Johnnies trying to get everything they
Yeah.
can in the last couple hours. But it's overwhelming, especially if you've never seen it before.
Mhm.
And of course, people inherently are attracted to what
It's
they
like
know.
Burning Man, but without the flash, floods, and starvation.
Yeah, and all the good things that we love, the gaming and and the events and the excitement.
Mhm.
It takes over the whole city. I mean,
Oh,
the
yeah.
entire downtown core of Gen Con or of Indianapolis is Gen Con for 4 days. It's
Mhm.
not just the convention center. There's the
Mhm.
convention center itself. The Indianapolis Convention Center is a massive, massive place. There's an exhibit hall that's massive. There are also many other halls full of gaming events, but they spilled out into every hotel,
Mhm.
and even the stadium, the football stadium across the
Mhm.
street was
It's just
full.
like it was in Milwaukee back in the day, where the event had just completely overgrown the city, and they
Yeah,
had like the college I remember playing RPGA D&D events on the floor, these curtained off cubicles on
yeah,
the floor of the basketball court in
yeah,
the stadium across the street.
yeah. It's the same
Absolutely
actually
bananas.
in the Indianapolis Colts stadiums. That's what is going on even now. So
Mhm.
everything old is new again, and it's a wonderful thing. So yeah, to sum it up, we had a great time at Gen Con. We did well as a company, which is of course nice, and will help us be able to come back. Um, and we were able to introduce a whole lot of people to Harn, and a certain amount of them become passionate and Harniacs, sometimes we call them.
Mhm.
And the archetype of a Harn fan is, we'll say, it's a grown up. It's someone who role plays in as an adult, probably on average, and perhaps role played in their youth, but still role plays, or maybe came back to it. Um, One of the more easy ways to identify if someone's going to like Harn is if they style themselves a world builder or a dungeon crafter. Anybody who's tried to make their own world or drawn their own dungeon, they really like what Harn has to offer, and so I look for that. when I have a chance to give my elevator speech to someone who's come and given me a moment of their time, and I hand them a Harn map or something like that, I ask questions like that. And I find that the ones who are, when I say world builders, are the ones who most enjoy Harn. And so Gen Con was great. I'll segue here to the question on the screen as Jim Isert, who was with us at Gen Con.
Mhm.
And he has moved back to Pennsylvania, where he's from, Erie, PA. He was born and raised there, and joined Columbia Games, I think 2015 or so. A couple years later, he moved out west to be right in our shop, and now, just literally this month, he's gone back to where his family is, but he's 100% still with us. He works remotely very well because the majority of his work is in marketing, communication with customers. He writes the newsletters, and he also produces videos, including all of our Kickstarter videos. And yeah, he's definitely a part of the company for the long haul. It doesn't matter where he lives. I think I mentioned earlier that it's a global community. There are writers from Europe, Australia, Canada, the United States, all over the country. And so it really doesn't matter that he's now 3 time zones away. We communicate literally every day, and we work very well together. So Jim was at Gen Con. He talked until his voice was hoarse, but he did a marvelous job. I was very grateful for his being there, his passion, and sharing the workload. Like I said, we talked to like 1,000 people in 4 days, and each time we give a long speech. You know, sometimes you give the short version, and sometimes you give the long version. But yeah, by the time we were done, we were a bit blue in the face, and so it was nice to share that with some other people like Jim Isert and Trevor Duvall, and I had some other people with me. My wife came for the first time, and we also had Cal Stengel and his family.
Hmm.
Cal is a wonderful supporter of the company, worked for us for a few years directly, and has always been a contributor, a writer, and a game master. And his family, like his sons, are integral also in that. So he was there too, and we just had a wonderful time. We all worked hard, but it's exhilarating, and we come away from it with just boatloads of new ideas and enthusiasm. And I still haven't caught up. I still haven't processed all of the business cards and the things that I picked up from Gen Con. And I'm working on it little bit by bit, while I try to do everything else. As I mentioned, we're back here at the shop. We're just a little family business, and so there's a lot to do. Logistically, creatively, we kind of do all of it. And I mentioned the global community, but all of those people, for the most part, the exception of Jim Isert, who's a real full timer, they have real jobs. Those other people, and so while their contributions are awesome and essential, the day-to-day work is all borne by the family here, and no complaints. It's a wonderful problem to have. Working in a family business I'm blessed to be able to work with my family full time, and to really not have to have another career. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I will say I have to be on my toes and nimble, and bounce around between the different kinds of things, the war games, the Harn, and other things, and sometimes technical things like how to make the website coding right, or even filing taxes. You know, just all the different things that make up a business, and certainly that includes kind of just digesting everything that happened at Gen Con. And so we're about a month out from that now, but I still haven't caught up. It's a good problem to have.
Overwhelming, I think, is a fair way to put that. What that must be like nowadays. I mean, it was over. I mean, for a lot of people, Origins is overwhelming, and it's like a 1/7 the size of Gen Con or something like that.
Something
So
like that. Yeah, I have been to Origins quite a few times. I used to come, way back in the day when it was a
mhm.
traveling show.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember when it was. I remember Firkin too, when
uh-huh.
he used to work the booth back in the
Yeah,
day, and I used to buy. And I think he was local too, local to us. That is, if I'm
Perkins
thinking
in
about.
Delaware, Ohio. It's
Yeah, that's
local to you,
that's
indeed.
right around here.
Yeah. He's somewhat retired from the grind, and but we had a great time, and he was able to appear at conventions in the Midwest quite a bit.
Hmm.
Actually, that's one of Jim Eisert's goals, is to appear at more conventions for us. Now that he's in Pennsylvania, he's more
Hmm.
central, so we'll be looking at appearances at Origins and the WBC and a few other events in that part of the world. And Jim will be the head man there for sure. So um, looking forward to that. But yeah, overwhelming just volume. Um, but like I said, the excitement and the inspiration is is worth it, because we come away with just tons of ideas and new contacts and all kinds of things. So I am looking forward to it for 2024.
So I feel like there's been over say the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years maybe. Kind of a harnic renaissance, a harnessance, if you will.
Ah,
I'm going to start using that.
you have
Um,
coined a new one,
a
Gary. That's
harnessance.
good.
I'm amazed I haven't come up with that, but I may even have used that before, to be honest, or maybe somebody else came up with it. I'm just forgetting that.
No, we're crediting you right here, right now.
Okay, that's fine. I'll assume the check is in the mail and will arrive at some future date. The but I feel like the profile. I mean, I got into Harn as we kind of started to stay before the show and then stopped because why waste this conversation? In the early 90s, right? And
Okay.
I remember back in the mid 80s, I guess it would have been 83, 84, 85, 86, something like that, right? Where I'm a kid, right? I'm like 12, 13 years old. And you'd go to the hobby store at the mall because that was still a thing then. And I would see those products and I'd be like, this looks neat, but I wasn't really sure what to make of it because I was 12. So I didn't, and then I just kind of forgot about it, right? I was
Yeah.
aware of it as a thing. And what's this Encyclopedia Harnica? Is this like a magazine? Is it like an encyclopedia? I mean, I didn't know what to make of that, right? It's very unconventional sort of publication format at the time, even now, but yeah, especially at the time. And then when I got out of college the first time, the time where I wasn't particularly serious about it, and it was sort of about 91, 92. I was at the local hobby store and I noticed somebody had a little index card up. They wanted to run Rollmaster. So I went over to his house and met the guy. And he's, we've ready to run Rollmaster, and he showed me this World of Harn, and I'm like, oh, I heard of that. I kind of remember that, and I was like, having like starting to look at the materials, and now 10 or so years older than that, I was like, oh, whoa, this is something else, man. This is unparalleled detail, and I think that's really still true.
Mhm.
I mean, there was a years long epic quest of me finding all this stuff in print, and then you guys had the indecency to reprint it all. I found this at a model train show in like 1995, and I had no idea prior to seeing it that it even existed. And I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, what's that? Give me that. How much? Here's some money. Here's some more money." So I don't quite have everything. I don't have all the Encyclopedia Harnicas, but I have real close to everything that you guys did before sort of the generation of electronics products, right? Um, but I feel like in the last, say, several years, there's been a real rebirth in people talking about Harn. There
Yeah.
was a point on YouTube at which me and the Complex Games apologist were the only people who ever appeared to have even heard of it. And he's
Right.
still around, but he's kind of taken a break from YouTube.
I
Um,
know him. Yeah.
And and maybe that's helped. I don't know, but I mean, I just feel like some higher profile people have taken notice, and the Kickstarters can't have hurt, right? Um,
Absolutely.
they are it's kind of got built. Kickstarter feels like it's got built-in marketing, right? Hey,
Uh-huh.
I got a Kickstarter going, blah 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 blah, and you spread it around and whatever through whatever channels you're doing, and
Mhm.
not all of them succeed. Although none of your guys's have busted, to my recollection,
Right.
in any respect, right? Either failing to fund or failing to deliver, right? I have no worries on that count. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Uh, but I really feel like Harn is getting. I mean, I was evangelizing this thing for years,
Mhm.
just word of mouth, right? This was
Mhm.
before. Well, I don't know if it was before YouTube was a thing, but it was before I got here.
Mhm.
So I kind of feel like certain content people and people with visibility have contributed to that, and the Kickstarters have all that. With the Kickstarters, everything's kind of fed each other, and now we're
Mhm.
in the role-playing boom, right?
Yeah.
Which, who the hell saw that coming
Right.
um back in 1990, or whenever Magic the Gathering came out and blew the whole market apart,
Mhm.
right?
Well, yeah, it kind of ebbs and flows. There was another big boom when the Dungeons and Dragons open source period happened, if you
Hmm.
recall, and then
Yep.
that
I've
blew
got the
itself
Avail
up
book
as
that you
well.
guys did. That was a dual stat book between Harnmaster and D20.
Yeah, and we sold a bunch of those and introduced a bunch of people that way too. I like to think that every time we do something, we get a few new people into our fold, and they're and it's a certain amount of them stick around, sometimes forever, and it's wonderful. But
Mhm.
yes, I will agree with you that the Renaissance is underway, and I can explain it in a few ways. The most significant way is just willpower, that we decided that we would double down on it, and um, colorizing it was one of the big decisions, so that effectively the old black and white material was very deliberately um, upgraded, and that certainly made it a little more eye candy sexy, and
Mhm.
people did notice that. The Kickstarters are a
Ooh.
big
Oh, next time
boost.
I do a Kickstarter for an Azadmir related product, I'm gonna put sexy dwarf time on the thumbnail.
Yeah,
I gotta get better at that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It does. It helps. We've got PDFs. That's a boon
mhm.
because gamers really like that format, the ability to take their material on their iPads or computers where they want, and searchable and indexable and all that. That's been a nice touch. Uh, the hardcover books, which is the latest foray, is also been part of the profile boost. The growth of the team, the writers. There's several writers that have become more prolific. There's also Brent Bailey, who's in Kansas City, Missouri, who is the chief editor and the point at which all writing and submissions go to, and he in turn crafts those into products. And he's been awesome at every level. One of the major, most obvious ways that you see that is what we call Harn Quest.
Mhm.
That's quarterly, approximately every 3 months, um, that we produce on a subscription basis, um, 32 pages or so um, of new content, and sometimes it's totally new. Other times it's an upgrade of.
Sometimes it's a lot more than 32 pages too,
That's
to be
true.
fair.
We don't always stick to the rule, but we do our best. And what Brent and the team have done that is magnificent is hit the deadlines, keep it on time, and there's a synergistic snowbally kind of effect that comes from that.
I
That helps
missed
with
the
this.
release of Trizin in 1985, by the way.
Well,
So,
yeah. I mean, you see, without that team, there's only my dad, and
Hmm.
he just obviously can't do everything at the same time. And he was effectively a bit of a bottleneck on process, and the that's both good and bad because he was able to ensure the quality control and make sure that everything that was published um, was up to his standard, which should be the standard of Harn in general, uh, but the growth of the team, the the single most important character being Brent Bailey, has been a real boon. So that harnessance, to use it again, is thanks to all of those factors. And I see it as just an arc that's going up and up and up. Each of our Kickstarters has been kind of growing in terms of the number of backers, and it's marvelous. It's very endearing to see all of that support, and um, makes emboldens me to just keep on keeping on. Um, and I think the sky's the limit on that. So um, let's hope that the Renaissance just keeps on going, and we can see that for another 40 years.
Yeah, I'd be perfectly happy with that. I hope it outlives me. Let's close with kind of one final thing that we've kind of touched on, which is sort of the article-based format
Oh
that
yeah.
Harn has kind of used, not quite from the beginning. Maybe that was the original intention, but he wasn't obvious in the first, like in that original master module. Sort of that article-based format, which has now lent itself very naturally to availability in PDFs.
Mhm.
And that just, I feel like you guys were like way ahead of the curve on that, right? You could buy everything a la carte if you want and just nickel and dime your way to having everything eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a structure designed for convenience and understanding, being able to the organize in a kind of encyclopedic format
Hmm.
everything that, and then find it when you need it.
Hmm.
It's also inherently expandable, which works really quite well. Um, so there are articles about places. There are articles about guilds, religious orders, creatures, just about anything, right? But always structured as an article, um, meaning it fits in the Encyclopedia Harnica, we call it. Um, and you can organize that in a variety of different ways. Some people have binders or folders, if you will, full um, of articles sorted by the theme, like monsters, in an article. Yeah, there we go.
I've got mine
Maps.
in these numbered mailer boxes. Is
Yeah,
how I organize everything. There's one for maps and one for like old campaign stuff and one for more maps because there's a million maps.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's really a great system for that, and we're sticking with it. It was pioneered more or less at the beginning, and seems to work. And it's nice. It's certainly nice to be able to organize things the way you want as a user and a game master. Um, so we seem to have stumbled upon the right thing there, and whether by accident or design, I couldn't say anymore. But it's lost in the mists of time. Some of that stuff, right?
yeah,
But
I suppose. I mean, it was a while ago, right?
it
So
was.
so all right, folks, we are just about out of time. I got the Kickstarter link. It's been linked a couple of times in the chat. Didn't think to put it in the video description, but it's on screen right now. If you search for Azadmir over on Kickstarter, you will also find it. It's still live, and as of right now, Handily has made its goal, and it's got like exactly 3 weeks left to go. If you back it for $1, you get a whole pile of free stuff in PDF. So that's totally worth your money if you haven't looked at Harn stuff before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And we really would appreciate that, of course, and welcome you to join us on Harn. And uh, the community is open and welcoming. So you can get in for $1 or even for free if you just go to the website and grab some things. And I sure hope to see you.
all right. All right. Thanks so much, Grant, for coming by. Thanks to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair for helping out and helping us produce this content. We'll be back, same time, same bat channel, and in a future show. And Grant, I'm sure we're going to have you on again at some point. This is
Yeah.
the second or third time already, so
Yeah.
next time something spins out of the dwarven workshops over in Blaine, Washington, we'll have to have you and maybe Richard and James on also. That would be actually pretty cool. We can
Oh, I
accommodate
love
that.
that idea. A round table, and yeah, we
Yeah.
got lots of different things we can talk about. So that'd be great, and lots of fun. You're a pleasure to chat with, and I'm sure that the users will agree. That thanks everyone for commenting and sharing, and let's keep it on.
All right. Thanks, everyone.